Hi, beekeepers from Windy Acre Bees out in Western Massachusetts. Happy New Year. And we are making candy boards today. We have a bunch of colonies we want to get some supplemental feed on just in case. But just to stress to this right off the bat, this is not something that we rely on as a complete resource for our bees. They should have already built up in your colonies, especially here in the Northeast by the end of October of last year. So basically, what we're putting on is an insurance policy, and it's making sugar candy for candy boards, which I use, or using a nonstick cookie pan. And just like this one here that you can grab at Walmart or Ocean State Job Lot, places like that, really, really cheap. And some other ingredients here, we have sugar, some Honeybee Healthy, water, of course, and a little bit of pollen substitute. And I'm going to walk you through the steps on how to make these. Now, beekeepers use a lot of different means of supplement feeding their bees for the wintertime. We are going to start getting into that crucial time of year where if you had a mite overload, your bees may have already perished already. But now we're into if your bees are still alive, mites are probably not a problem though, but food could be. So if they didn't store enough away, or with our problem we had this year, a very warm November and warmer than typical December this year or last year, in 2023, so they consume their resources a lot faster because they're not clustered as tight. They're not as dormant as long. But now that we've gotten into that cold weather, snow on the way, we want to start thinking about maybe adding some supplement feed just to the top bars of their upper boxes in case they cleaned out or are working on those resources really quick. This will get them through that stretch of the end of February into March, and if they're really low on resources, they're going to need it now. So again, I'm going to go through the ingredients first and what you need. So the first thing that you want to get is you want to get a candy thermometer. It goes up to 500 degrees. It's got a long stem on it. That's the first thing you want to pick up. I use this non-stick pot. To clean that up, you just fill that up full of water later and let it boil for a couple minutes, and it cleans right up nice. And I use this burner that's attached to a propane tank right here. You can do this over the stove too. Just be careful you don't splatter it everywhere because it makes quite a mess if you got to clean it up. So the next ingredient is 4 pounds of sugar, and that basically works out to be 8 cups. So 8 cups of sugar will be 4 pounds of sugar. And so just remember that, write that down. I got a metal whisk right here, and then my next ingredient is Honeybee Healthy, and that is just a feeding stimulant. Once you put these candy boards on there, they'll be attracted to that candy board if they're not consuming their own resources, and they'll start eating away at a candy board. And then 1 teaspoon of pollen substitute. It's 1 teaspoon of the Honeybee Healthy feeding stimulant. If you use lemongrass, use only about, I would say, at least a half a teaspoon because it's very concentrate. So I'm going to walk you through the process of doing this. Why do I use pollen substitute in the wintertime? Well, let me explain that. Pollen substitute protein powder is not a good thing to be feeding bees in the wintertime per se, because if they can't take cleansing flights, then they can't rid that after it's digested in their system, and they potentially can have problems and die. So we don't want to use a lot of pollen substitute. We only use just a teaspoon of that pollen substitute right there. And that is just to give them, like you and I, we need protein. It's to give the bees a little tiny trace amounts of protein to consume and feed brood that is now going to start becoming a reality here in about the next 3 weeks. The queens will start to pick up as the days get longer. They're going to start laying little patches of brood, so that little minute pollen substitute will help feed her. It'll also feed that brood, and that brood will start replacing the bees that you lost from natural causes over the wintertime. So very important thing to point out about that pollen substitute. I disagree with winter patties. I disagree with large amounts of pollen substitute just because it messes up their system because they can't take cleansing flights because it's so cold. So keep that in the back of your mind no matter what you're making. So basically, we're going to go through step by step right now as to how to make these candy boards or to make sugar candy using these ingredients. Now, since I've been using this 3 years ago, I have definitely seen a really good outcome going into March as far as populations of bees. I've seen larger brood patterns end of February, early March into April than I normally saw in the past, and just more vigorous and more vibrant bees and bigger populations in my colony. So it's a definite plus. This was designed originally by David Burns at Long Lane Honeybee Farms in Illinois. So thousands of us that use these and use this type of sugar candy, thank you very much for that. So we're going to start off with, originally it was 12 ounces of water, according to David, but I like to use 14 ounces of water because of the evaporation, and I want less foam and more of the liquid, and I'll explain a little bit about the liquid, how that turns to liquid when the bees eat it later. So that we have this burner right here, and like I said, that you can use, do this on your stove. It just takes longer to heat the water up and heat the sugar up. So here we go. So as this water's heating up, and it's only going to take about 2 minutes or so, basically we're going to bring this water to a boil. So as soon as we start seeing a bunch of bubbles on the bottom, and you can already see them forming on the edge already with this high temp burner, we're going to gradually stir in the sugar. So I usually do about, maybe these are I think these are 4 cups I said each, so I'll put in about 2 cups at a time, and I'll dissolve it in here, and you can see how fast that water starts to boil. And we'll keep adding in the sugar gradually over about 1.5 minutes or 2, stirring it in, until it gets to a consistency of a very thick water, let's put it that way. And so while this is boiling here, I'm going to add about 1/3 to half of that container full of sugar, and we're going to start stirring it in. Now, when the first time you do this, you're going to sit there and go, well, that's just a little bit of water, and that's all that tons of sugar. And yes, it is. But you got to remember that, the granulated sugar that we use originally came from sugar cane, and its original state was liquid to begin with. So kind of like ice, when you heat it, it melts. When you have sugar and you get heated with a little bit of moisture, it melts and goes back to its original state, and that's where we're headed right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start stirring in the rest of the sugar here, and we're going to go off to the next step. All right, so now I'm continuing to finish off the last of my sugar as far as dissolving it here in this pot, and it's going to have like a little bit of a milkshake consistency, maybe not as thick, but we're just going to get that stirred in really good. Now, when you're doing this, pay attention to your time. Have all your ingredients right in front of you and ready to go, because towards the end of this, you're going to want to do 2 things very quickly so that this doesn't start to get all frothy and make a mess of your candy board. It'll still work, but it'll make quite a mess. So what we're going to do now is take our candy thermometer, and we're going to place it in, and I clip it onto this little handle right here and let it set in place just like that. Now, we want this thermometer, you see where that little red pin is on the left-hand side, top left-hand side, we are going to want to get this up to 250 degrees. I don't want you to get it up to 240, 248, 252, 255. It's got to be right at 250 degrees. And then you're going to make your next step as far as adding in the Honeybee Healthy at 1 teaspoon and the pollen substitute at 1 teaspoon also. So while I'm getting this up to that 250 degrees, I do take a whisk and I just stir it a little bit here. You can see where it gets a little frothy on the top. That's okay. But by doing this, you're just agitating that leftover sugar that didn't quite get dissolved, and you're keeping this as much as a liquid form as possible. We don't want to get too much disturbance in it, but we don't want to just let it sit there and cook away. And we definitely want to make sure that we pay attention to that 250 degrees, which we're getting really close to now. Keep in mind, this stuff is super hot. This isn't like a little bit of wax that gets in your hands and you peel it off. This can, really burn. So if you're not experienced with this, probably the best thing is to have a, pair of oven mitts on one of your hands, and or have oven mitts or some rags here to pick up the handles of that before you pour it into a candy board. So we got about a couple more degrees to go. This is basically what my candy boards look like. This is the finished product in here. And it supplements the bees' feed. Once I flip this over upside down, you can see there's an entrance there. When I flip that upside down, I place that on the top bars of my colony and just let them have it. So if you don't have these feeder covers, these are insulated, they're special covers. If you don't have them, this is the way to go. I also use these for a couple of my colonies just because I don't have enough of those to fit on all of my colonies, so I need a couple extra. So this is just a cookie sheet, non-stick, works great, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. So where are we at here? We are about a degree or two from that 250 mark. I am going to stir this in again, and then I'm going to get my other two ingredients ready to go so that we can pour this in. So when you get ready at that 250, you're going to want to shut the heat off. You're going to remove that pot from the heat. You don't want it to continue to cook. It is going to do that with the heat off for another minute or two. So we definitely want to take it off that heat at the 250 mark. So we're just about there. And let's see where my teaspoon is here. Of course, I tell everybody have your ingredients and stuff ready, and I don't. But right here, do not add in the Honeybee Healthy or the pollen substitute until you are at that 250 mark and you shut the heat off. So we're just going to set that down for a second. We are going to cut off our heat real quick. This is where you got to work fast. What I do is I sprinkle that in really, really quick, knock it right off in there, and then I take my Honeybee Healthy, 1 teaspoon of that real quick. I dump it in. And like I said, this will still continue to cook and raise in temperature a little bit. So at this point, I want to stir this in. Here we go. So I'm going to put you on pause for a minute. We're going to stir this up, and we're going to get this ready to pour. So now we're ready to pour this in. We're not wasting any time after we put those ingredients in. This is the cookie sheet. And we're basically going to just pour it all the way around really quick, but carefully. Take our pot and put it away here, set it aside. And then what I like to do is just take my whisk and just kind of carefully spread this out really fast. Here, make sure you have a level surface to put these pans on, otherwise you'll get too much. Here's some other candy boards I've made. Otherwise you'll get too much at one end and not enough at another end. So right there for me on that part of my table is level. And that's all there is to it. So what's going to happen now is this is going to start to cool. Now, if you store these anywhere, say above 45 degrees, if you make them ahead of time, store them about 45 degrees, you'll get some liquid that will start, the candy board will start dissolving around the edges a little bit. Don't worry about that. Once it gets cooler, it'll harden back up. So you see this is in a liquid form, and it hardens up to actually a candy board or a candy. And the way the bees like to eat, they have a proboscis, which is basically like a straw. So to gather nectar and water, they suck that up using that proboscis. And they don't really chew. I mean, if they have to get something out of the hive or grab onto something, they do have little mandibles where they will chew through things or pick things up in that way. But what they'll do is they'll start clustering, somewhere in this candy board as it's in the hive, and they'll cluster up nice and tight. And the heat that they're generating during the wintertime will actually heat up that candy, and it'll start turning it a little bit to a liquid, and it'll be able to start to eat it that way. They don't actually chew through this candy board. They will if they have to. It just would take them a long time and a lot of energy. So that's basically it. So let me show you the result of that. Here's the one I did earlier. Now, if you put them in this cookie sheet, the cookie sheet is a little big for the colony, for the hive, if they come out all in one sheet. So I just tap it lightly and I break it into these chunks. And then I take these chunks, they're about, that probably half an inch thick, maybe a little less than that. And I just lay these on top of the frames in my top boxes, and then put the lid back on, the inner cover back on for the ones that don't have these insulated covers. And that's it. I'll come back in probably about 3 weeks and just check and see how they're doing, if they've chewed through a lot of it. Sometimes they will prefer to actually eat this candy board um, for metabolism reasons, to boost their metabolism. The sugar content is a lot higher than what their stores were, so they can keep warmer and keep their metabolism up. They may elect to eat that sugar a lot faster than they're actually their own stores. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there, beekeepers that I work with, part of our bee club. They teach a lot of different ways to supplement feed. Anything from, oh, I don't know, just a piece of newspaper with granulated sugar sprinkled on it, which is perfectly fine. They've been doing it for decades. I did that originally. To putting newspaper down and using a sugar like a dough mix that they make, and then kind of flatten it out, and then they push it on top of the bars. For people who are using a lot of colonies, or have a lot of colonies, 30, 40, 50 colonies or more, this is time consuming, and it may not be the way to go. And the way that they do it, there is nothing wrong with it at all. I have the opportunity and the time at night to just come out here to the shed and to put these candy boards together. I usually have 23 to 23 colonies during the summertime. I drop them down to almost maybe around 19, which is what I have now. And to get them through the winter by doing combinations or boosting populations, to do combinations so that they have enough for the wintertime. So I don't mind sitting out here and doing this. I have seen a difference in my colonies in the springtime. Not a giant difference, but a significant difference to know it as far as population-wise coming out of wintertime. So I do enjoy doing this, and I really believe it helps the bees. And I know other people that use this recipe here, and they have great success with it. So, so a recap, real quick: your sugar, a honeybee healthy, a candy thermometer, a whisk, a non-stick pot, your burner, however that choice is, and some pollen substitute. 1 teaspoon of pollen substitute, no more. 1 teaspoon of feeding stimulant. Let's see, 8 cups of sugar. These little measuring cups are 4 cups each, so I use 2 of them full. And dissolve it into the hot water, which is going to be 14 ounces of hot water. And then stir it in, and then add your feeding stimulant and your pollen substitute after you take the heat off. Remember that magic mark, 250 degrees. Nothing under, nothing over. If you do forget, or you don't work quick enough, you wind up with a candy board looking like this. Looks awful, but it is, the contents and everything there are all the same. This will still work. They will still eat this the way it is. I just like a nice finished product looking like this. And be careful, again, this right here is cooled down so I can tap it with my hands, but as it is right now, it's still pretty warm, but it's nice and smooth, and it works really, really good. So I hope this helped. It's just another tool for your toolbox for taking care of your bees. If you want to use it, that's perfectly fine. If you want to go out and just use regular granulated sugar on some newspaper, that's perfectly fine too. Nothing wrong with that at all. You ask a beekeeper a question, and every beekeeper is probably going to give you, a different answer. So, be your own beekeeper. Take care of your bees, and find what works for you the best. Thanks for watching. Happy New Year, and we'll talk to you soon.